Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. I am Angela Ballard, and I am really looking forward to this session and talking to all of you about digital privacy and how it's changing the online space. What we'll be focusing on today are changes that are impacting our digital ecosystem that have come about as a result of consumer demand for more control over their privacy online. However, today we won't be talking in any detail about regulations like the GDPR or the CCPA. What we will be focusing on is how the web browsers like Safari, Chrome, and Firefox have responded to this demand from consumers. We'll talk about how these changes have impacted the way that we all do business online today. And we'll talk about how you can respond to these changes with technical updates to your site and make sure that your business continues to thrive. We've seen the browser's response to consumer sentiment about privacy manifest in a lot of different browser tools and browser settings, and some of these have resulted in really broad changes, while others have resulted in pretty nuanced changes. The approach taken between Apple, Google, and Firefox does differ a bit, and today I'm not going to debate whether they're right or wrong or good or bad, because at the end of the day, our customers are using these browsers to connect with all of us. So if we want to reach them there, we want to reach them where they are on all of their devices, it's really important for us to understand the changes the browsers are making and adapt to them. Now, before I go into any of that, let me introduce myself a little bit further. So I'm Angela Ballard. I am a senior product manager here at CJ. I currently live in Chicago, and I've been with CJ a little over 8 years. I chose this picture here of me and my fiance Patrick because it was taken the day after CJU last year. Every year, Pat flies out to Santa Barbara to meet me after CJU, and we spend a few days just soaking up sun and drinking wine and decompressing. And I'm really missing that this year, and I'm missing seeing all of you in person. So fingers crossed for next year we get to be together again. In my role here at CJ, I manage our product solutions that are focused on tracking, attribution, commissioning, and integrations. So when this topic came up as something we wanted to talk about at CJU this year, I was really excited because I love talking about these things. I live and breathe this stuff every day. And if we're being honest, there really never is a dull moment in the world of web tracking. Since we're talking about privacy today, I thought it would be good for us to all get on the same page about the definition of privacy. And really, this is the definition that I'm referring to today. I was looking on the internet for a definition that I liked, and I found one in an eMarketer report. And it describes digital privacy in this way. Privacy is about controlling the flow of personal information and the right to control how one's information is shared with others via digital channels. I really like this definition because it aligns so well with the changes happening in the digital space. Controlling how consumer data is shared across the web is really the center point of all the browser changes that we're seeing today. And it's the center point of the changes that the browsers are signaling they're going to be making into the future. I mentioned a minute ago that a lot of the browser response, really all of it I would imagine, is in response to consumers' sentiment that they want more control over their digital privacy. So I've certainly had to ask myself, what does that mean, right? What do they really want? In 2018, Norton did a survey of 10,000 adults across 10 countries, and they found some really interesting things. They found that 84% of the people surveyed reported that they had taken at least one step toward protecting their online activities and personal information online. Things like clearing their cookies or changing their browser privacy settings or even sharing less on social media. 64% of the same group of people also said that they're willing to accept certain risks to their online privacy to make their lives more convenient. What this tells us is that consumers want those great online experiences, and they want to connect with the companies that make their life better. But they're also more aware than ever of their online privacy, and they want more control over it. So for all of us who are part of businesses that operate in the digital space, the web is our tool to connect with customers. We have to be able to do this in a privacy-conscious way. The landscape of changes that are happening across the web and across the digital space is really vast, right? And there's a lot to try to understand. So what I'm going to focus with you all on today is how these changes are impacting your website and the technology partners that you work with. This will set you up to be able to ask better questions about how you're integrated with your partners and to understand what changes you need to make. That means I'm not going to get into every detail of Safari's ITP or Firefox's tracker blocking because all of the changes out there have had a similar impact on the technology that we all use. And they've complicated how we can access and share data across the web. These browser changes and regulatory changes like the GDPR have created a digital space where it's increasingly difficult to create a consistent experience for your customers. There are some inherent conflicts between some of the browser changes we're seeing and the regulatory guidance we're receiving, and this is mostly because we're still in early days of creating a more privacy-centric digital space. But this is the challenge that we all have to rise to. It's kind of a coincidence. The day before our marketing team brought this topic to me as something we wanted to talk about at CJU, and I really didn't know what they were going to bring to me. I had a call with an advertiser to talk about our advertising universal tag. And that discussion turned into about 45 minutes of us discussing these browser changes and sharing our thoughts and opinions on what to do and where these changes were taking us in the industry. And it was a really great conversation that I just wasn't expecting to have that day. And what it made me realize was that there's so much that we all need to know and understand in order to keep our businesses moving forward. And that's what I really wanted this session to be able to help you with. What I want to help you understand is that you can create that consistency that a great customer experience requires. You can continue to grow your business, and you can do all of that while respecting your customers' needs for privacy online. All right, this is our agenda for the rest of the session. We will start by talking about our digital ecosystem, who the players are and how they operate. And while many of you probably know a lot of these things, this is really important to talk about because it will provide the context for the technical concepts that I'll be going through when we talk about the browser changes and the technical updates you can make. Then we'll move into talking about the browser changes themselves and how they're impacting our digital ecosystem and all of the players in it. And then we'll talk about things that you can do and the types of changes you can make to keep your business thriving amongst all of these browser updates. And before I move along into that, I just want to remind all of you again about our Q&A feature. I'll be talking through a lot today, so if you have questions, please type them in there, and we have left time at the end to answer questions, so I'll be glad to get through as many of them as we can. Okay, so to talk about the digital ecosystem, I thought it would be helpful to kind of take an example of a typical shopping experience so that you can all see sort of different website components, how they work, and how they interact with each other. So when we're talking about a typical shopping experience, this is you shopping online, let's say. You're looking at products and you expect certain things to happen, right? You expect to see product details. Maybe you expect a personalized experience if you're logged into your account and the site can tell you things like what size you might wear in that product, right? And you add items to your shopping cart, and typically the site will create a cookie on your browser that it will then read to remember the cart items you put in there, and this probably allows you to leave the site and come back a couple weeks later and your items will still be there, right? These things that are visible to you are what we call first-party functionality, and I'll be using that term throughout the rest of the session. These are things that are owned by the website and they're visible to you as the customer. They're also really, really important to your customer experience on this site, your shopping experience, right? There are other things going on this site that are equally important to your experience as a customer, but they're not visible to you. They're happening behind the scenes. An example of this would be most websites work with an analytics provider. And as you're browsing the site, the analytics company is collecting information on behalf of the site about how you're navigating the products you're looking at, and it's putting together insights for the brand. As a customer, you expect all of these things to work together seamlessly. You expect the site to show you products and remember the items you put in your cart, but you also expect the site continues to improve your experience into the future. That analytics company makes sure the brand continuously makes your shopping experience better and helps them remember the things that you've done in the past. All of this working together creates that seamless customer experience that gets better over time. In talking about our digital ecosystem now, the websites, so the brands you shop on, the content sites you visit, and all the third parties they work with, like their analytics providers, they make up the ecosystem, right? And I'm talking about this so much because all of these players have been impacted by the browser changes in different ways. In order to understand how you can update your integrations to keep your business moving forward, and in order to understand how to be able to ask the right questions of your third-party partners, it's important to have this kind of context on how all these players work together. So we'll break the ecosystem down into two groups. We have the first parties, so these are the websites that you visit or that customers visit, and they're responsible for things like signing you into your account and the other things I was talking about, like remembering the cart items. The second group is what we'll call third parties, and third parties work behind the scenes to ensure the websites understand how to better connect with customers through things like improved shopping journeys, more relevant and inspiring marketing campaigns, and giving customers the ability to share their favorite things with their social networks. Third parties have been significantly impacted by the browser changes, but there are ways for first and third parties to work effectively together, and that requires us to understand what the browser changes are, which is what I'll talk about next. When we talk about these browser changes, I like to talk about them in two buckets. I feel like it's a good way to kind of wrap your head around the impact that they have. The first bucket is a broad impact on how third parties have typically worked on the web. Third parties are restricted from doing a lot of basic things, like setting cookies, reading information from a customer's browser, and sending data back to their own servers. And keep in mind that before a few years ago, with the initial rollout of ITP, third parties pretty much had free reign of doing all of these things on the web, right? There weren't a lot of restrictions. The second bucket of change is a bit more nuanced, and browsers are now limiting the first parties, the websites themselves, in how they can do certain things, like storing and persisting information in cookies. Even though that cookie that's created by the website would be considered part of the first party functionality, when the browser sees specific behavior, they are restricting some of those things. Combined, all of these changes are focused on limiting what we call cross-site tracking. The idea of cross-site tracking is sending information about a customer from one website they visit to another website they visit. And a really common example of this is populating a marketing campaign ID or name in a URL parameter when a customer clicks an ad and is taken to that brand's website. This information is likely used by the brand and their marketing provider and their analytics provider to get a better idea of campaign performance. And it's a really common way that third parties and the websites themselves, capture data and understand customer behavior. And that's the thing about cross-site tracking, is it's incredibly common and it's relied upon by everyone in the digital ecosystem. These browser changes have not made it impossible to share information in this way. They've just changed the rules for how we can do it. That's why understanding the changes is important, because you need to see cross-site customer behavior in order to create a great customer experience and have a thriving digital business. You just need to capture the information in a different way. That's what I'm going to get into next. So before we can talk about the integration updates, I want to talk you through some technology concepts specific to web functionality. And before I get into all of that and talk about what you see on the screen here, I just want to remind you again about the Q&A feature. Please put your questions in there. We have time at the end to go through them. These technology concepts I'm going to go through will be foundational to the integration changes that you can make with your third parties. Understanding these will enable you to ask the right questions in your organization and of your third parties so you can ensure those relationships continue to be successful. I will be talking about client-side code and server-side code through the rest of this session. And what I'm referring to is code that makes things happen on a website. And the client-side versus server-side distinction refers to where the action is taking place. Client-side code refers to scripts that run directly in a web browser, meaning that client-side code takes action directly on the customer's device. Server-side code refers to any processes that run on a server before sending information back to the web browser in response to a customer's action on the site. Client-side code makes up a lot of a website's functionality because it allows the site to quickly respond to user actions like hovering over some text and you see something expand in front of you, right? Client-side code is also what most third-party tags use today. The tag makes a call directly to the third-party domain in the browser, and all of this, all client-side code is very visible in the browser, right? The core difference between this and server-side code is that server-side code requires that the website's web server responds with information in order for it to load functionality in the browser. This provides a level of certainty to the browser that the code that's running belongs to the website owner. Server-side code is often used for things like login, and browsers consider it to be the most secure and privacy-friendly way to serve up web functionality. The distinction here is important because the crux of the changes happening in the web browsers, especially in Safari, is focused on differentiating these two types of code and treating server-side functionality more favorably than client-side functionality. Now, if we look at the technology that we've used to integrate third parties on websites, it hasn't really changed much over the years. We've used client-side code forever because it's simple. It has been a simple and effective approach. Most third parties will ask you to place a tag on your website. This tag uses client-side code to collect information from the browser, probably some data you provide yourself like order details on a conversion page. And every time that tag is loaded, it is sending information back to the servers owned by the third party. The changes we've been discussing in the browsers have largely impacted this ability to collect information using client-side code, specifically for third parties. Browsers aren't eliminating the ability to place a third-party tag, but they're making it very hard for those tags to read their own cookies or access information shared across websites. They're also making it harder for third parties to persist any information in a customer's browser for a period longer than a day or maybe a week at best. So even if that third party can gather some information, it's overall less useful. Now, all of this leads us to the final piece of the puzzle, which is answering the question, what changes should I make to respond to all of these browser updates? Using server-side integrations and storing data in your first-party domain is the answer to that question. This type of website functionality has not been impacted because it's important to the core features of your site. By leveraging server-side code and setting up server-side integrations with your partners, you'll continue to see the full benefit of the services they provide. And I will give you an example of how you can do this in just a couple slides. But before we move into that, I want to move back into talking about our digital ecosystem because it's important to understand how using server-side integrations changes this ecosystem, changes the way data is shared, and makes this ecosystem more functional amongst all of these browser changes. What we know is that third parties are targets of restrictions by web browsers, and when they cannot operate fully, the value they provide to both you and your customers is overall less. So the goal of updating your integration with your third-party partners is to unify this ecosystem. What that means is you want to start using the same web technology for your third-party partners as you do for your other website functionality, which uses server-side code. Doing this allows you more control over what information third parties collect about your customers, and it ensures those third parties are not blocked or restricted by browser changes. One benefit of this approach is you're storing information about your customers in your own first-party space, in your domain. This is a more privacy-friendly way to operate because your customers have intentionally created a relationship with you. We are all adapting to new and changing definitions of how to be privacy-focused in the digital space. And this approach is an adapted way to share data with third parties, but with some limitations on how broadly the data can be accessed. When you share data with third parties in this way, that information cannot be accessed freely across the web, but it does allow you to continue working effectively with your third-party partners. As I mentioned earlier, leveraging server-side code will help you achieve more resilient technical relationships with your third-party partners. It protects your ability to work with those partners and continue seeing the benefit they provide to your business and to your customers. Depending on what the third party needs to be able to do, the integration ask may look a little bit different for each partner. I'm going to show you an example of how this could work. Let's start by talking about how your website uses server-side code, and it probably uses it for a lot of different things, but a good example is always customer login. So when a customer logs into your site most likely creates a cookie to remember that they're logged in, and this cookie is created using server-side code. And your site reads this cookie to persist that login probably for some period of time. And this type of cookie is not impacted in any way by the browser changes we've been discussing. You can use this same technology on behalf of your analytics provider. Something most analytics providers need is they need to be able to persistently recognize a customer when they're on your site. And they typically would use their own cookie to do this. You can create this cookie on behalf of your analytics provider using server-side code. And this allows your analytics provider to have the persistent recognition they need to provide you with insights. What this means is that the cookie your analytics provider uses now exists within your domain. It's a cookie that you can control and that can only be used when the customer is on your site. This approach is more protective of your customer's privacy, and it allows you to work with your analytics provider and get the same level of insights about shopping behavior and marketing performance. At CJ, we've created a server-side integration for our advertiser universal tag, and I'm really excited to be able to share with you some of the things that we've learned from having our advertisers adopt this tag. I'm hoping that sharing some of our learnings will make it easier for you to start and work through the process in your own organization. One of the things we've learned is that server-side integrations sometimes involve different internal teams. You're probably used to working with a web team or a team that makes website updates through a tag manager, but a server-side integration may involve a team like systems engineering or a team specifically dedicated to your web servers. If you're not sure who to talk to or where to go, your web development team is still a great place to start because they should be able to guide you toward the right people to talk to. Something else we've learned is that you may need a security review depending on what the integration is asking for. When you set up a server-side integration with a third-party partner, you're creating a deeper technical relationship than just putting a tag on your site. This may require a data security team within your organization takes a look at the integration specs, and your third-party partner should be able to help you answer any questions that come out of that. Something this process has also reiterated for us is that it's really important to connect your third-party partner to your internal technical teams as soon as possible. Through our advertiser universal tag integrations, we've seen a lot of technical hurdles disappear pretty quickly when our integration engineers can speak directly to your internal teams that are handling the integration. At CJ, one of the first steps in updating your integration with us is a technical kickoff call, and this really does set the process up for success. And last, ask for help. If you need help getting buy-in to put integration updates on your technical roadmap, your third-party partners can absolutely help you understand the value and articulate the value of the changes you're asking to make. We want to help you advocate for those internal resources, so please ask. We can definitely provide that level of information for you. So to wrap up, the benefits of making integration updates with your third-party partners really comes down to these three things. It will allow you to continue providing the best possible experience for your customers and to continue improving that experience over time by having a complete picture of how customers interact with your brand. It also allows you to continue operating in a privacy-conscious way by giving you more control over how your customers' data is shared while continuing to take full advantage of everything your technology partners have to offer. Your technology partners, like all of us here at CJ, we will guide you on how to update your integration to be resilient against these browser changes. When you're planning your roadmaps into next year, make sure you're talking to all of your partners about the updates they recommend. We want you to thrive. We want you to stay focused on growth and to stay focused on your customers and not on having to keep up with every browser update that comes up. We, just like many of the other technology partners you work with, are working really hard to make sure our integrations work seamlessly with all of the changes happening across the web. And we're working to make sure we're thinking about the future of these changes and designing resilient integrations. Start talking to your technology partners, start talking to all of us. We're ready to help and get you set up for a fantastic 2021. Thank you all so much.